The night I fell asleep on the Alphaking's chest, his wolf had already broken 2 women and killed a third that year. I didn't know that yet. I didn't know his name, his curse, or the way his heartbeat sounded beneath the cage of his ribs, slow and predatory, like something counting down. All I knew was exhaustion, 21 hours on my feet, scrubbing stone floors until my knuckles split. And when I stumbled into the West Wing chamber at midnight and collapsed onto what I thought was an empty bed, I pressed my cheek against warm skin and fell into the deepest sleep of my life. I woke to 40 wolves staring at me through the open doorway. The Alphaking's arm was locked around my waist, his body curved around mine, his breathing steady for what the palace healer would later call the first time in 14 months. But that comes later. Let me start 3 weeks earlier. The day I became worthless enough to be expendable. My name is Briar Thorne and I was sold for a border tax, not dramatically, not at auction, not with chains or ceremony. My pack, the Cedar Hollow settlement, a farming community of 90 wolves scattered across the Montana floodplains, owed 3 years of unpaid tribute to the Stonecrest Dominion. The tax collector arrived on a Tuesday morning when the sky hung low and grey, promising snow that wouldn't come for another week. I knew it wouldn't come. I'd been tracking the pressure systems since Sunday. Barometric reading 29.8 inches of mercury and holding steady. Wind patterns from the southwest. The storm everyone feared was still 4 days out, maybe 5. My father taught me to read weather before he taught me to read words. He died 2 years ago, leaving me his instruments. A homemade barometer, fashioned from a mason jar and balloon rubber, an anemometer, built from bicycle spokes and ball bearings, a rain gauge that had once been a whiskey bottle. Crude tools, accurate tools. The farmers in Cedar Hollow relied on my predictions. Plant the winter wheat, now I'd tell them. The freeze won't hit for 10 days. Or pull the livestock to high ground. Flash flood in 36 hours. I was right more often than the radio forecasters from Billings. But being useful doesn't make you valuable. Not when your mother decides you're a liability. The tax collector was a lean wolf named Garrett, with dead eyes and a ledger book bound in cracked leather. He counted our grain stores in the communal warehouse, counted our livestock in the southern pasture, counted our pack members in the settlement square. Then he counted me. The girl, he said to my mother, Morrigan, as though I were a sack of barley with a pulse. How old? 22, Morrigan said. Her voice was flat, transactional. She stood with her arms crossed and her dark hair pulled back so tight it made her face look like a skull. Able-bodied, healthy. She's standing right here, I said. You could ask me. Garrett didn't ask me. He wrote something in his ledger, a number probably, or a notation that translated my entire existence into a unit of economic value, and told my mother that one able-bodied female wolf transferred to Dominion service would clear 18 months of the debt. My mother, to her credit, hesitated for almost 30 seconds before agreeing. I'd like to think I would have fought harder if I'd been the parent. But hunger makes cowards of people who would otherwise be brave. And Cedar Hollow had been hungry for 2 winters running. My younger siblings, Freya, 14, and Finn, 11, needed grain more than they needed an older sister who spent her time staring at clouds and drawing topographic maps of terrain nobody cared about. So I went. I had 2 hours to pack. I owned almost nothing worth packing. My father's weather instruments, a leather-bound journal where I'd been mapping the Cedar Hollow region for 5 years, documenting every ridge and valley, every seasonal creek bed, every game trail, 3 changes of clothes, a winter coat that had been my father's and still smelled faintly of tobacco and pine sap. Freya cried when I said goodbye. Finn tried not to and failed. Morrigan watched from the porch with her arms still crossed, her face still empty. You'll do fine, she said. It wasn't reassurance. It was dismissal. I climbed into the covered wagon with 6 other debt transfers, wolves from small settlements who'd been traded for tax relief like livestock at market. We didn't speak much during the 2-day journey through the mountain passes. What was there to say? We were cargo now. Inventory. The Stonecrest Citadel sat at the center of the Ravencrest Dominion, like a Stoneheart, massive angular built from dark granite, hauled from the northern quarries 3 centuries ago. It wasn't beautiful. Nothing about the Dominion was beautiful. It was effective, functional. Every wall, every gate, every watchtower served a purpose that had been calculated, tested, and optimized for control. We arrived at dusk on the second day. The sky was turning the color of a bruised, deep purple bleeding into black. I checked my pocket barometer out of habit. Pressure dropping, 29.1. The storm I'd predicted was accelerating. 48 hours now, maybe less. Nobody else noticed. Nobody else cared. We were processed in the lower courtyard by a woman named Dagna, the head of domestic staff, who had the build of a siege weapon and the temperament to match. She was broad-shouldered, grey-haired with hands that looked like they could snap kindling without effort. Names are irrelevant, she told us, her voice carrying across the courtyard like a drill sergeant's. You'll answer to your assignment, floor staff, kitchen detail or laundry crew. You'll work 6 days per week, you'll eat what's provided, you'll sleep in the East Wing dormitories. She paused, letting her gaze sweep across our faces. You'll stay out of the West Wing entirely. A boy beside me, thin maybe 17, with nervous hands, raised one trembling finger. What's in the West Wing? He asked. Dagna looked at him the way you look at someone who's just asked to pet a landmine. The Alphaking's private quarters, she said. And the last 3 women who entered uninvited are either buried in the Eastern Cemetery or wishing they were. She let that settle like frost. One is buried, she continued, her voice dropping lower. The other 2 are in the medical ward. They don't speak anymore. They don't do much of anything anymore. The boy's hand dropped back to his side. Dagna assigned me to floor detail, scrubbing, polishing, the kind of work that makes you invisible while slowly destroying your knees and knuckles. I became a ghost in grey linen, one of 24 maids who moved through the citadel's halls like shadows present but unnoticed, the essential but unacknowledged. The work was hard, monotonous. The great hall alone was the size of a small village, paved in dark granite that showed every scuff mark and used daily by hundreds of wolves who apparently believed that boots were decorative and mud was a personality trait. But monotonous work gives you time to listen, and I've always been good at listening. The kitchen gossip network was the most reliable intelligence operation in the citadel. The cooks talked while they worked. The servers talked while they carried trays. And Tessa, a red-haired laundry worker who'd been at the citadel for 3 years and who attached herself to me on my second day with the cheerful declaration that I looked like someone who needed a friend more than a bath and barely more than a bath filled in everything else. His wolf doesn't sleep, Tessa told me while we folded bed linens in the laundry room. Steam rose from the industrial washers, making the air thick and hot. That's the real problem. The beast is as always at the surface, always in control. The healers have tried sedation herbal compounds, even the old spirit rituals from the northern territories. Nothing works. She lowered her voice, glancing toward the doorway to make sure no supervisors were listening. He hasn't shifted back to fully human in 14 months, she continued. His eyes haven't been human since the 3rd candidate died. They're gold now, all the time. Wolf gold. 3rd candidate, I asked. Tessa's expression shifted to something between pity and horror. Luna candidates, she said. The Elder Council sent 3 women over the past year, trying to find him a mate, trying to stabilize his wolf through bonding. She set down the sheet she was folding, her hands going still. The first one was Elara Finn, 24 years old, daughter of the Northeastern Ridge Alpha. Beautiful, strong bloodline. She lasted 6 hours in his presence before her wolf went into full submission collapse. What does that mean? I asked. Catatonic state, Tessa said quietly. Her mind just shut down, couldn't process the dominance pressure. The human consciousness retreated so far inward it never came back. She's alive technically. They keep her in the medical ward. She eats when they feed her, sleeps when they put her to bed. But the woman, she was gone. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. The second was Mira Holt, Tessa continued. 26, from the Western Valley's pack. She made it 2 days. They found her in the corridor outside his chambers, shaking so hard, her teeth were chattering. Couldn't form words. Her wolf had fractured, split between the desperate need to submit and the primal instinct to survive. She's in the medical ward too, stares at walls, flinches at shadows. And the third, I asked though I already knew the answer would be worse. Ellery Nash. Tessa's voice dropped to barely a whisper. 24. Volunteered because her family needed the political advancement. Her wolf submitted so completely that her autonomic functions followed. Heart failure. She died 3 months ago. The cold in my stomach spread to my chest. How I asked, how does a wolf kill you by submitting? Her heart slowed to match the submission response, Tessa said, and it just forgot to speed back up. Doctor. Hargrave said it was like her body decided that if the wolf was surrendering, everything else should too. She picked up another sheet, her hands moving mechanically. 3 women, she said. 3 outcomes along a spectrum from devastating to fatal. Same cause each time. The Alphaking's wolf is too dominant, too far gone. No female wolf can withstand it. What's his name? I asked. Tessa looked at me strangely. What can his name? I repeated. The Alphaking. What's his actual name? Kieran, she said slowly, as though the question itself was odd. Kieran Wolf, but nobody calls him that. He's just the Alphaking, or him, or the West Wing problem. She paused. Why do you ask? Because everyone talks about him like he's a position, I said. Not a person, even you. The wolf, the beast, the Alphaking, like he's a natural disaster instead of a man. Tessa's expression softened with something that might have been sympathy. Maybe that's because the man is gone, she said quietly, and all that's left is the disaster. I learned more over the following days. Kieran Wolf had inherited the throne at 21 after his father Alpha Marcus died in what the official record called a hunting accident, and what everyone else whispered was an assassination orchestrated by rival territories. He was 27 now, 6 years on the throne. 6 years of holding the largest military territory on the Montana-Wyoming border through a combination of tactical genius and personal menace that made seasoned warriors that developed sudden diplomatic flexibility. The rumors about him were contradictory. Some said he was brilliant a strategist who'd restructured the Dominion's trade networks and doubled agricultural output in 3 years. Others said he was barely human, that his wolf had become permanently dominant, that the man and beast had merged into something operating on instinct rather than reason. What everyone agreed on was that women suffered around him, not by his hand, not intentionally, but his wolf, the raw dominance that radiated from him like heat from a forge, overwhelmed anyone who got close. The dominance differential was too extreme. His wolf presence crushed weaker wolves the way atmospheric pressure crushes deep-sea creatures brought too quickly to the surface. The Elder Council had stopped sending Luna candidates after Ellery's death. The diplomatic implications were severe. An alpha without a Luna was a pack without succession, and a pack without succession was a target for ambitious neighbors. But no one had a solution, and no one volunteered to become the 4th attempt. I spent my first week invisible, scrubbing floors, polishing silver, learning the rhythms of the citadel, where the power clustered, where the gossip flowed, where the dangerous silences lived. I should have stayed invisible, but I've never been good at leaving things alone. It's a character flaw, or a survival mechanism. The line between the two has always been blurry for me. The incident that changed everything happened on day 10. I was scrubbing the great hall floor on my hands and knees near the eastern colonnade when the massive oak doors crashed open and a delegation swept in. 15 wolves in the deep blue and silver of the Silver Pine Compact, a rival territory to the south. At their center walked a woman who radiated the confidence of someone who'd never entered a room where she wasn't the most important person present. Lady Vivienne Cross, Silver Pine's chief diplomatic envoy. According to the Kitchen Intelligence Network, she'd been angling for a political marriage alliance with the Stonecrest Dominion for 2 years, not because she wanted Kieran Wolf, but because she wanted the territory and trade routes his mating would give her family access to. The delegation swept past me without acknowledgement. I was furniture, less than furniture. Furniture occasionally gets polished. I continued scrubbing. The delegation arranged itself in the formal audience area at the hall's center. Servants, actual service staff, not floor crew, brought wine in silver pitchers. The Stonecrest Beta, a massive scarred wolf named Ronan Cade, who moved like a boulder that had learned to walk, positioned himself at the head of the hall. He stood in for the Alphaking, who apparently did not attend diplomatic functions anymore. The Silver Pine Compact proposes a renewed discussion of the marriage alliance. Lady Vivian said, her voice carrying with practiced projection. Given the unfortunate outcomes of previous Luna candidates, we believe a more strategic approach is warranted. I am prepared to present myself as a candidate under modified terms. Ronan's expression suggested he'd rather negotiate with a forest fire. Lady Cross, he said carefully, his voice a deep rumble that matched his appearance. The Alphaking has suspended all Maid selection proceedings indefinitely. With respect, Betacade, an indefinite suspension is a polite word for surrender. Vivian replied, sipping her wine. The Dominion cannot function without succession. I have been in correspondence with Lord Aldrich Corwin of your Elder Council. He agrees. That name landed differently. I noticed Ronan's jaw tighten. Lord Aldrich Corwin was the head of the Elder Council, a lean wolf in his 50s who, according to Kitchen Intelligence, was deeply unhappy with Kieran's refusal to take a Luna and had been building political support for what he called alternative succession strategies. Lord Corwin does not speak for the Alphaking, Ronan said, his voice even more careful now. Lord Corwin speaks for the council, Vivian said smoothly, and the council speaks for the pack's future. I'm not proposing a love match, Beta. I'm proposing a political solution to a political problem. Modify the proximity protocols, limited exposure, a mating in name, if not in bond. The Dominion gets succession. The Compact gets trade access. Everyone benefits. I shouldn't have been listening. I shouldn't have been anywhere near this conversation. But I was on the floor with a scrub brush, and no one notices the person cleaning. Until they do. Vivian's gaze landed on me like a hawk spotting movement in tall grass. Maid, she said. More wine. I looked up from my scrubbing water dripping from my brush. I'm floor staff, my lady, I said. Not service crew. I didn't ask your assignment, Vivian said, her tone sharpening. I asked for wine. I could have just gotten the wine. That would have been the smart move, the survival move. The move of a woman who understood that debt transfers don't argue with diplomatic envoys from powerful territories. Instead, I said, the service station is behind you, my lady. Silver pitcher. You could reach it without standing. The silence that followed had edges. Ronan closed his eyes briefly, the expression of a man watching a small animal walk directly into traffic. Vivian's face didn't change. That was the frightening part. No anger, no surprise. Just the calm recalculation of a woman determining the most efficient way to make an example. Stand up, she said. I stood. My knees ached. My hands were cracked and raw from the lye soap. I was wearing the grey service uniform that made me look like an underfed shadow. Name, Vivian said. Briar Thorne. Settlement. Cedar Hollow. Eastern Floodplains. A debt transfer. She said it the way someone might say disposable, with the surgical contempt of a person who has organized the world into categories and placed use in the last one. How long has the Dominion been accepting field mice into its service staff? She asked. A few of the Silver Pine delegation laughed, polite laughter, performed rather than felt. 10 days apparently, I said, though the field mice scrub faster than you'd expect. The silence that followed was longer, colder. Vivian set down her wine glass with a click that echoed. Betacade, she said, not taking her eyes off me. I'd recommend disciplinary review for this one. The Dominion's hospitality standards appeared to have relaxed. Ronan looked at me with an expression caught between exasperation and something I might have been imagining the faintest trace of amusement. "Noted Lady Cross," he said. "Maid Thorne, return to your duties." I returned to my scrubbing. The delegation continued their meeting without further incident. But I felt Vivian's gaze on me for the rest of the session. Calculating, not angry. Calculation was worse than anger. I'd made myself visible. And in a place like the Stonecrest Citadel, visibility was rarely a gift. That night, Tessa found me in the dormitory and informed me, with the cheerful urgency of someone delivering catastrophic news, that I was being reassigned. "West Wing," she said. My stomach dropped. "Walbert Tagna's orders, effective tomorrow morning. You're on West Wing chamber maintenance." The West Wing, where the Alphaking lived, where women didn't come back from. "To be fair," Tessa added, wincing at my expression, "one died and two just stopped functioning. That's different from not coming back." "You're not helping," I said. "I'm spectacularly not helping," she agreed. "Look, it's probably not as bad as it sounds. Chamber maintenance rotation is external work. You clean the corridor, the antechamber, the outer rooms. You don't go into his private chamber. Nobody goes in there." "Then why does the assignment exist?" "Because someone has to maintain the space around the blast radius," Tessa said. "That's pack logistics. Welcome to government work." I spent that night lying on my dormitory cot, staring at the ceiling, constructing and dismantling theories about why I'd been reassigned. The optimistic theory, routine rotation, nothing personal. The realistic theory, Vivian had complained and Dagna had moved me to the most undesirable post as informal punishment. The paranoid theory, Lord Corwin, who was in correspondence with Silverpine, wanted fewer witnesses in the Great Hall during negotiations. None of the theories made me feel better. All of them led to the West Wing. My first morning on West Wing duty, I arrived at dawn. 2 sentries stood at the corridor entrance, both large, both armed, both wearing the resigned expressions of men who'd given up trying to understand staffing decisions. They nodded me through without comment. The corridor was long and dim, lined with iron sconces that cast more shadow than light. At its end, a heavy oak door marked the boundary of the antechamber, the outermost room of the Alphaking's private quarters. I pushed the door open. The antechamber looked like a battlefield. A heavy oak table had been splintered down the center, the 2 halves thrown against the opposite walls. Chairs were reduced to kindling. The iron candelabra was bent at a 90-degree angle embedded in the stone wall at a height that suggested it had been hurled with considerable force. Claw marks, deep ragged furrows, scored the stone floor in patterns that looked like pacing. Back and forth, the marks of a caged animal, measuring its enclosure. I stood in the doorway and assessed the damage, with the part of my brain still functioning rationally while the rest of it screamed suggestions about leaving immediately, running a very long distance, and possibly changing my entire identity. Then I heard breathing from beyond the antechamber, through another door, heavier, reinforced with iron bands, standing 3 inches ajar. The private chamber, the room no one entered. The breathing was wrong, too slow, too deep. It had a resonance, a vibration that I felt in my sternum before my ears fully processed the sound. Like standing too close to a large predator. Like the air itself was being warned. Every instinct told me to step back, close the antechamber door, report the damage to Dagna. Every survival mechanism honed by 22 years of existing in a world that is not gentle with powerless women told me to walk away. Instead, I put down my cleaning supplies, crossed the ruined room, and pushed the heavy door open wider. The Alphaking of the Stonecrest Dominion was sitting on the bare stone floor in the far corner back against the wall, knees drawn up, forearms resting across them, shirtless. His body was, I need to be clinical about this because I refuse to be the woman who loses her train of thought at a torso, heavily muscled, scarred across the ribs and shoulders, built like something designed for sustained violence. His dark hair was longer than military standard, falling across his forehead. His jaw was shadowed with days of growth. His eyes stopped me. Not hazel, not amber, gold. Full burning lupine gold, with no visible human iris remaining. Wolf eyes in a human face. And they were locked on me with an intensity that made every hair on my body stand at attention simultaneously. He didn't speak. He didn't move. He didn't growl, which I'd been expecting, or attack, which I'd been fearing. He watched me with those impossible eyes, and the deep resonant breathing didn't change. I stood in the doorway and did the only thing my brain could produce under the circumstances. "You've destroyed the furniture," I said. He blinked once, slowly. The first indication that I was being processed as something other than scenery. All of it. I continued because apparently I decided that survival meant keep talking. "The candelabra is in the wall, which is actually impressive from a physics standpoint. The table is beyond repair. The mattress looks like it insulted your mother. Nothing. Just the breathing and the stare." "I'm the new chamber maintenance," I said. "I'm supposed to clean the antechamber. I'm not supposed to be in here." "I know that, but the door was open and I thought someone might be hurt." Those luminous eyes tracked me like a predator, deciding whether something that had entered its territory warranted action. The wolf was evaluating me. The man, I wasn't sure the man was entirely present behind the gold. "I'll clean the outer room," I said carefully. "I won't come in here again unless the door is open. Is that acceptable?" A sound, low, barely audible. A rumble from somewhere deep in his chest, the sound a wolf makes when it acknowledges a presence without categorizing it as prey. I chose to interpret that as yes. I backed out of the doorway, slowly closed the heavy door until it was nearly shut, leaving the same 3-inch gap I'd found. Then I spent the next 4 hours cleaning the antechamber, repairing what I could, cataloging what needed replacement, and trying very hard not to think about the man sitting on a stone floor in a wrecked room alone, watching the door I had closed. I came back the next day, and the next. Each morning, the antechamber was in ruins again. Each morning, I cleaned it. And each morning, the inner door was open exactly 3 inches. The same gap maintained, with a consistency that suggested intention rather than accident. He was leaving it open for me, testing whether the strange creature that had entered his territory would return, and what it would do when it did. On day 17, I brought food. Not from the kitchen. Dagna would have had me flogged for unauthorized food transport. From my own meal ration. A bread roll, some dried meat, an apple that was slightly past its prime but still edible. I placed them on a cloth near the inner door, knocked once, and retreated to the antechamber. When I returned the next morning, the food was gone. On day 18, I brought food again. This time I spoke through the gap. "I don't know if you're eating regularly," I said to the 3-inch opening. "The kitchen staff says trays left outside the corridor are usually untouched. If you'd rather I didn't bring food, just break something specific. The candelabra again maybe. I'll take that as a no." The candelabra survived the night. I brought food again the next morning. On day 19, I found something outside the inner door that hadn't been there before. A blanket, folded, placed deliberately on the stone floor near the gap, positioned so I would see it the moment I entered the antechamber. The nights had been cold. The dormitory heating was inconsistent, and I'd been sleeping in my service uniform with a thin sheet. I hadn't mentioned this to anyone, but apparently the wolf behind the door had noticed. Heard the cold in my voice maybe, smelled it on my skin. Some part of him, man or beast, had registered that the creature who brought him food was shivering, and had responded. The Alphaking of the Stonecrest Dominion had given me a blanket. I picked it up. It was thick, heavy, lined with fur worth more than my entire debt transfer contract. "Thank you," I said to the gap in the door. A rumble, low, that chest-deep sound of acknowledgement, and I began to understand. Something was happening between us, something slow and careful and entirely outside my understanding of how power dynamics worked between an Alphaking and a Maid. We were building a language, food and furniture and 3-inch gaps. And I didn't know what it meant yet, but it felt like the first honest exchange I had had in the Citadel. Day 20 brought wool socks. I found them outside the inner door when I arrived for my morning shift, folded with the same deliberate care as the blanket. Thick grey wool, hand-knitted, sized for feet, smaller than his. My left boot had a hole in the sole. I'd been walking on cardboard I'd cut to fit, replacing it every few days when it wore through. The wet from the stone floors had been seeping through for a week. I hadn't told anyone, but he'd noticed. I sat down right there on the antechamber floor, turned the socks over in my hands, and felt as something crack open in my chest that I didn't have a name for. "You're paying too much attention," I said to the gap. My voice came out rougher than I'd intended. "But thank you." Again, the rumble came back, longer this time, almost like no. I was imagining things. It wasn't possible for a wolf's growl to sound amused. On day 21, I talked to him while I cleaned. Not about anything important. About the weather. The storm system I'd been tracking was finally moving in pressure. Down to 28.6, we'd have snow by tomorrow. About kitchen gossip. The head cook and the supply master were having an affair everyone pretended not to notice. About the absurdity of scrubbing a floor that would be shattered again by morning. I didn't expect responses. The rumbles came anyway. Low sounds at irregular intervals that I gradually realized corresponded to moments in my monologue that carried emotional weight. He was listening, processing, responding in the only language his wolf-dominant state allowed. On day 22, everything shifted. I was halfway through cleaning the antechamber when I heard footsteps in the corridor outside. Multiple sets, moving fast. The door burst open. A woman stood there, mid-20s, dark hair, with eyes that looked like they hadn't slept in weeks. She wore kitchen staff grey, but the fabric was clean. Not a debt transfer then. Someone who'd chosen to work here. "Briar Thorne," she said. "Yes, I'm Isla." She glanced back toward the corridor, nervous. "Isla Thorne, your sister." The world tilted sideways. I'd known I had an older sister. Morrigan had mentioned her occasionally, always in the past tense, always vaguely. Isla had left Cedar Hollow 6 years ago for work in the northern settlements. That was all I'd been told. "What are you doing here?" I asked. "Working kitchen detail," Isla said. "I've been here for 3 weeks. I didn't know you were coming until I overheard the staff roster. I need to talk to you, privately." She looked past me toward the inner door, still standing 3 inches ajar. "Is that," she lowered her voice, "is that safe being this close?" "Safer than you'd think," I said. Then, because the situation was already surreal enough, "What do you need to talk about?" "Not here." Isla glanced back again. "Tonight. The East Garden after dinner service. Please." She left before I could answer. I stood there holding a scrub brush, my mind spinning. 6 years. Isla had been gone for 6 years, and I barely remembered her face. She'd been 20 when she left. I'd been 16. We'd never been close. There was too much age gap, too much distance. Morrigan had carefully maintained between us, and now she was here, in the Citadel, 3 weeks before I'd arrived. That wasn't coincidence. I finished cleaning the antechamber in a daze. When I reached the inner door to leave my usual food offering, I found something new. A wild flower. It was small purple, the kind that grew in high alpine meadows. There were no gardens in the West Wing, no ground-level windows. No possible way he could have accessed the outside. But there it was, placed on the cloth where I left his food, positioned with the same deliberate care as the blanket and the socks. I picked it up. The stem was still fresh. "I don't know how you got this," I said to the gap. My throat felt tight. "But it's beautiful. Thank you." Silence. Then, a sound I'd never heard before. Rough, broken, barely recognizable as human. 2 syllables. Fragmented and effortful, like a man trying to speak a language he'd almost forgotten. "Briar," my name. Mangled, barely formed, but unmistakable. I stood in the antechamber with a wildflower in one hand and tears running down my face, absolutely no idea what to do with the realization that the Alphaking, a man the entire continent feared, had just tried to say my name. The man was still in there, somewhere beneath the wolf, fighting his way back through broken syllables and wildflowers and gifts left in 3-inch gaps. That evening, I met Isla in the East Garden. It wasn't much of a garden. A small courtyard between the dormitory and the kitchen wing with a few hardy evergreens and stone benches. At this hour after dinner service, it was empty. Most of the staff were either working or already asleep. Ila was waiting on the farthest bench, her hands twisted together in her lap. I sat down beside her. Up close, I could see the resemblance. Same dark hair as Morrigan, same sharp jawline. But where Morrigan's face was hard, Isla's was haunted. I need to tell you something about Dad's death, she said without preamble. And Mom, you deserve to know. The air left my lungs. Dad died in a hunting accident, I said. It came out automatic. The official story I'd been told. No, Isla said. Her voice shook. He didn't. She told me everything. Our father Callum Thorne hadn't died in a hunting accident 2 years ago. He'd been poisoned. Slow arsenic exposure over 6 months. By Morrigan, because he discovered she'd been embezzling settlement funds for 3 years working with a corrupt tax collector to skim from the communal stores, selling off pack resources and pocketing the difference. Callum had found the ledgers, confronted her, told her he was going to report it to the settlement elders. 3 days later, he started getting sick. Isla had been there. She'd been 24 still living at home. She'd watched him waste away, watched Morrigan play the concerned wife while dosing his food with poison purchased from a traveling merchant. I knew Isla whispered. I knew what she was doing. I found the arsenic in her dresser. I confronted her. She stopped, her hands shaking harder. She said if I told anyone, you and Freya and Fane would starve, that she'd make sure of it, that the settlement would never believe me over her, and that accidents could happen to children too. So you stayed silent, I said. My voice sounded distant to my own ears. I stayed silent, Isla confirmed, and I helped her cover it up. I corroborated the hunting accident story. I lied to the elders. I watched them bury Dad and I stood there and I said nothing. She looked at me finally, her eyes red. I left 6 months later because I couldn't stand looking at her anymore. I couldn't stand looking at myself. I've been working kitchen detail in different packs for 6 years trying to, outrun it. But you can't outrun something like that. Why are you telling me now? I asked. Because I watched you walk into the West Wing 2 weeks ago, Isla said. Everyone was saying you'd be dead within days, or broken, like the other Luna candidates. I was terrified. She took a shaking breath. But you're not dead. You're not broken. You're still you. Walking in there every morning like you're not afraid of anything. And I realized you're braver than I ever was. You've always been braver. I'm not brave, I said. I'm just can't. You are. Isla cut me off. You walked into a room with a wolf that killed the last woman who got too close. You keep going back. That's not stupidity. That's courage. And it made me think that maybe I could be brave too. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small glass vial. Dark liquid inside. I don't know what's happening in the West Wing, she said. But I know politics and I know Lord Corwin. He's been meeting with Silver Pine representatives. I've overheard conversations in the kitchen. They're planning something. She pressed the vial into my hand. That's nightshade extract, she said. I found it in a storage room off the council chambers. Hidden. Someone's stockpiling poison and I don't think it's for pest control. I stared at the vial. The liquid was almost black. Why would someone... I started. I don't know, Isla said. But Mom used the same thing on Dad. Different concentration, slower acting. But the same substance, and if someone's hoarding it in the Citadel, it's not for anything good. She stood up. I can't undo what I did, she said. I can't bring Dad back, but I can help you. If you need allies, if anything happens, I'm here. That's all I wanted to say. She left before I could respond. I sat alone in the garden, holding a vial of nightshade and trying to process everything I had just learned. My father had been murdered. My mother was a killer. My sister had been living with that knowledge for 6 years, and someone in the citadel was stockpiling the same poison. I should have been afraid. I was. But fear and fury have always coexisted in me without either one winning, and right now fury was running a close second. I hid the vial in my mattress that night. And the next morning, I went back to the West Wing with my cleaning supplies and a head full of murder and questions. Kieran was waiting, not in the corner this time, standing, in the center of the chamber, facing the door as though he'd been listening for my footsteps in the corridor. He was wearing a shirt. That detail hit me harder than it should have. Someone Ronan probably had brought him clothes and he'd put them on. Simple dark linen sleeves rolled to his forearms. Trousers. No shoes. The domesticity of it was jarring against the backdrop of the ravaged room and those burning gold eyes. But the eyes were different today. Still gold, still wolf, but something else was visible behind them. Awareness. Focus. The predatory tracking had shifted to something more deliberate. Recognition. "Good morning," I said. His head tilted, measuring me, measuring the moment. I set down my cleaning supplies and looked at the room. The furniture was still destroyed, but the table had been moved. The two halves I'd reported as beyond repair had been pushed together, the split running down the center like a scar. They were held in place by crude iron clamps that looked like they'd been fashioned from the bent candelabra. He'd fixed the table, not replaced it, fixed it with his own hands. And on the table was food, a meal arranged in the same pattern I used when I left his offerings. Bread, dried fruit, and honeycomb. I stared. The evening food trays that staff left outside the West Wing corridor, the ones Tessa said, were always returned untouched. One was missing. He'd intercepted it, raided it selectively, arranged the best parts into a meal for me. The Alphaking of the Stonecrest Dominion, whose wolf had killed a woman and broken two others who existed in a state of isolation that the entire Elder Council had failed to address, had repaired a table with iron clamps fashioned from destroyed furniture, intercepted his own food delivery, and laid out breakfast for the maid who cleaned his antechamber. "Oh," I said. It was the only word I had. "Oh." His eyes tracked my face, intent, waiting for a reaction. I walked to the table, sat down, picked up a piece of bread and ate it while he watched. "This is good," I said. "The honeycomb especially. Where did you even get honeycomb delivered to the West Wing?" A sound, not a growl, not a rumble. A huff, the wolf equivalent of a scoff, as if the question was beneath him. I laughed. I couldn't help it. The absurdity, the demolished room, those burning eyes, the improvised furniture, the carefully arranged honeycomb overwhelmed my capacity for appropriate emotional responses. And what came out was genuine, involuntary laughter rising from a place too deep to be manufactured. Kieran's eyes changed, not the color. They remained gold, but the quality shifted, a flicker brief and stunning behind the wolf, a spark of the man, as though the sound of laughter had reached past the surface and touched whatever remained of Kieran Wolf beneath the beast. He moved then, not toward me, to the other side of the table. He sat down slowly, deliberately, his movements careful, as though he was remembering how furniture worked. We ate in silence. The silence was a conversation. Food and furniture and laughter and door gaps that grew wider every day. After the meal, I felt the weight of the previous night settling back over me. The vial hidden in my mattress, Isla's confession, my father's murder. "Can I ask you something?" I said. Kieran's eyes lifted to mine, waiting. "Do you remember your father?" The change was immediate. His entire body went rigid. The gold in his eyes blazed brighter. I had struck something raw. "I'm sorry," I said quickly. "I didn't mean." "Yes." The word came out like gravel, rough, fractured, but clear. A full word, not broken syllables. His first real word to me beyond Briar. "You remember," I said softly. "Hunting." Another word forced through a throat that barely remembered human speech. Not accident. My breath stopped. "You know it wasn't an accident," I said. His jaw clenched. A nod. Sharp. Furious. "Do you know who?" I asked. He stared at me for a long moment. Then he looked toward the door, toward the outer corridor, toward the council chambers beyond. The implication was clear. Someone in the citadel, someone with power, someone he couldn't prove or couldn't reach or couldn't fight while trapped inside his own wolf. "I'm sorry," I said, "for your father and for—" I gestured vaguely at the room, at him, at the impossible situation. All of this. His hand moved across the table, slowly, stopping just short of mine, not touching, but close enough that I could feel the heat from his skin. An offer, a question. I moved my hand the final inch. My fingers brushed his. He went absolutely still, as though any sudden movement might break the moment. We sat like that, fingertips barely touching across a table he'd repaired with scrap metal, and I felt something shift between us that had nothing to do with biology or wolf bonds or political necessity. Recognition. True recognition. Two people who'd both lost fathers to violence and power. Two people who understood what it meant to be trapped in his wolf me, in a system that treated people as currency. "I should get back to work," I said eventually. My voice came out quieter than I'd intended. His fingers tightened fractionally against mine, not restraining, reluctant. "I'll come back tomorrow," I said. "I always come back." He released my hand slowly. I stood, gathered my cleaning supplies and left. But before I closed the door, I looked back. He was still sitting at the table watching me. His eyes were gold, but the man was visible now, clear, present, fighting his way back. The next 3 days blurred together in a pattern that became routine. Day 24. I brought him news, not gossip, real information. The southern border treaties Ronan was negotiating. The supply chain issues affecting winter stores. Things that mattered to an alpha, even one trapped in his own territory. He listened, asked questions in single words or short fragments. His speech was improving. Slow, effortful, but improving. Day 25. He showed me maps. They were spread across the repaired table. When I arrived, military maps of Stonecrest territory and the surrounding regions. Old maps. Some of the ridge lines were marked incorrectly. "These are wrong," I said, looking at the Montana-Wyoming border terrain. He tilted his head, a question. "This ridge," I pointed, "it's not passable in winter. Too steep, too exposed. If someone were planning an invasion route, they wouldn't use this." I pulled out my own journal, the one I'd brought from Cedar Hollow, and showed him my maps. 5 years of careful topographic documentation. Every elevation change, every seasonal variation, every detail that might matter to someone who needed to know the land. Kieran stared at my maps, then at me, then back at the maps. "You made these..." His voice was still rough, but the sentence was complete. "Since I was 17, I said. "My father taught me. He said knowing the land means survival." Smart man. He was. Kieran studied my maps for another minute. Then he posed his military maps aside and pulled mine to the center of the table. "Show me," he said. For the next hour, I walked him through the terrain, where the valleys would flood in spring, where the passes would close in winter, where an invading force could move, and where they'd get trapped. He listened like I was a general, briefing him on enemy positions. Not like I was a maid who scrubbed his floors. When I finished, who said, "You should be advising Ronan, not this." He gestured at my cleaning supplies. "Ronan doesn't know I exist," I said. "He will." Kieran's voice was quiet, certain. "When I can speak for you, he will." Day 26, the Elder Council called an emergency session. I found out because Dagna pulled me aside during evening meal. "You're wanted in the council chambers," she said. Her expression was unreadable. "Now." My stomach dropped. The council chambers were on the 3rd floor of the main tower. I'd never been inside. I'd never needed to be. Ronan met me at the door. "Briar Thorne," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes, sir." "Walk with me." He led me through a side door into a smaller room, a preparation chamber adjacent to the main council hall. Dr. Seren Hargrave was there. An older woman, silver-haired, 60 at least, with the intensity of someone who'd spent decades solving problems no one else could. "Sit," Ronan said. I sat. "You've been assigned to West Wing maintenance for 15 days, Ronan said. "In that time, the Alphaking has shown more improvement than in the previous 14 months combined. His speech is returning. His shifts are stabilizing. He's eating regular meals, sleeping." He paused. "Doctor, Hargrave has been monitoring his vital signs remotely. His heart rate is normal for the first time since the curse began. His wolf dominance markers are receding. Whatever you're doing, it's working." "I'm not doing anything," I said. "I just clean and talk to him, and sometimes we eat together." "That's more than anyone else has managed," Dr. Hargrave said. Her voice was clinical, but her eyes were warmer. "I've studied wolf bonding dynamics for 40 years. What I'm observing isn't standard dominance hierarchy. Your wolf signature doesn't trigger his dominance response. You equalize each other." "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means you're biologically compatible in a way that bypasses the normal power structure," she said. "It's documented in ancient texts compatibility thresholds where two wolves match so precisely that dominance simply doesn't activate between them. They operate as equals." "But that's—" I stopped. "That's mating bond territory." "Yes," Dr. Hargrave said quietly. The room went very still. "I'm not a Luna candidate," I said. "I'm a maid, a debt transfer." "You're the first person in 14 months who's had a conversation with him," Ronan said. "Labels don't change that." A voice from the doorway made us all turn. "No, but they complicate it considerably." Lord Aldrich Corwin stood at the threshold. Lean, silver-streaked hair immaculate. The head of the Elder Council radiated it, decades of accumulated power gathered through channels that were technically legitimate and functionally ruthless. Behind him stood Lady Vivian Cross. "Of course, the council has been informed," Corwin said, entering without invitation. "As has the Silver Pine delegation, given the diplomatic implications." "Diplomatic implications of a maid having a conversation," I said. Corwin looked at me. His gaze was measured, clinical. "The assessment of a man who categorizes everything by potential utility. The implications of the first successful stabilization of the Alphaking's wolf in 14 months, he said. Through unauthorized, unsupervised contact with an unvetted female. The council has questions. Then the council can address them to me," Ronan said. His voice had gone hard. "Not to a maid who was doing her assigned duties." Assigned duties that resulted in unprecedented biological response, Vivian said, stepping into the room. Her blue and silver attire was pristine. Her expression, political composure, was her most dangerous configuration. "That's not standard maintenance beta. That's either a weapon or a miracle." "I'm not a weapon," I said. "And I'm definitely not a miracle. I'm a maid who talked to someone everyone else gave up on." "Then you won't object to repeating the experience," Corwin said. "Under controlled conditions, tonight, with the council observing." I looked at Ronan. His expression said very clearly that he didn't like this, didn't have the political leverage to stop it, and that the best he could offer was his presence during whatever came next. I looked at Dr. Hargrave. She met my gaze with scientific hunger that needed data more than it needed to protect my comfort. "Fine," I said. "But I have conditions." Corwin's eyebrow rose. Vivian's mouth thinned. "No physical restraints," I said. "No sedation. No one in the room except Ronan and Dr. Hargrave. And someone tells me why you're really doing this, because this isn't about his health. This is about control." Corwin studied me for a long moment. "Perceptive," he said finally. "Very well, truth. The Alphaking cannot function without succession. If you stabilize him long enough for a mating bond to form, the dominion survives politically. If you fail, we have documented evidence that alternative leadership structures are necessary. Either way, the council's position is secured." "So I'm a test," I said, "and he's a problem to be managed." "He's an alpha who's been non-functional for over a year," Corwin said. "The dominion requires stability. You may provide that, or you may simply provide proof that he cannot be saved. Both outcomes serve the pack." It wasn't a choice. It was a threat dressed as options. When I asked, "Tonight," Corwin said. That evening, I walked into the West Wing for what felt like the 100th time, and everything was different. The sentries had been tripled. Dr. Hargrave waited in the antechamber with monitoring equipment. Ronan stood at the inner door, arms crossed, radiating protective tension. "The council is in the outer corridor," he told me quietly. "They won't enter the chamber." Corwin insisted on proximity. I insisted on a closed door between him and the Alpha. "Vivian is with Corwin." He paused. "Briar, if anything feels wrong, anything, you come out immediately. I'll be right here." I nodded, took a breath, pushed the inner door open. Kieran was standing, not sitting, not pacing. Standing in the center of the room, facing the door as though he'd been waiting. Everything about him was different tonight. His posture was straighter, more alert. Those impossible gold eyes tracked me with an intensity that had shifted from assessment to anticipation. Recognition. He was wearing the same dark linen shirt from yesterday, the same trousers. He'd prepared. For me. The table was set. Another meal. Bread, cheese, dried fruit. And in the center a single wildflower in a cup of water. He gestured to the table. An invitation. I sat down. He sat across from me. Wait in silence. But the silence was different tonight, charged. Aware of the observers beyond the door. Aware of what this meal represented, a test, an evaluation proof of concept for people who saw us as variables in an equation. "They're watching," I said quietly. "I know." His voice was still rough, but the words came easier now, more controlled. "Does that bother you?" "Yes." He looked at me directly. "But we came back." "That matters more." My throat tightened. "I told you I would." "People say many things." His hands were flat on the table, fingers spread. "Few keep promises." I reached across and put my hand over his. His fingers closed around mine immediately, carefully, like something precious he was afraid to break. We finished the meal, holding hands across a repaired table. When the food was gone, I stood. So did he. "I should go," I said. His hand tightened around mine. "Stay," he said. "Here. Tonight." I looked at him. At the bed in the corner frame, replaced mattress, already showing stress marks but intact. At the room that was slowly being rebuilt through sheer force of will. At the man who was fighting his way back from the wolf, syllable by syllable, because someone had finally stayed long enough to give him a reason. "Yes," I said. His expression shifted. Relief, gratitude, something deeper I didn't have words for yet. He walked to the bed, pulled back the covers, lay down on his back, and looked at me. An invitation. Clear, deliberate. I lay down beside him, rested my cheek against his chest, felt his arms settle around me, the same firm protective hold, but gentler now, more certain. His heartbeat was steady, slow, human. I closed my eyes. From beyond the door, Dr. Hargrave's voice carried through the medical monitoring. "Remarkable. Heart rate normalized during the meal, now dropping further as she settles. Alpha signature receding to baseline. He's shifting back toward full human consciousness. This is complete integration. The wolf and the man are rebalancing." And then beneath my ear, something that changed everything. His voice, rough, barely a whisper, syllables formed with deliberate effort, but not broken this time, not fragmented, whole. "Thank you for staying." My eyes burned. I pressed closer. "Always," I whispered back. His arm tightened, his breathing deepened, and for the second time in 14 months, Kieran Wolf fell into natural human peaceful sleep. From the outer corridor beyond the antechamber, beyond the door, that was supposed to keep the council at a distance, I heard a voice, Lord Corwin's, quiet, calculated, speaking to Vivian with the careful deliberation of a man revising strategy in real time. "Forget the marriage alliance. She's more useful than a Luna." A pause. "She's a leash." I heard it, every word, and I felt Kieran's arm tighten around me even as sleep pulled him under. Even as the wolf receded and the man resurfaced, some part of him had heard it too, and understood exactly what it meant. I woke to sunlight cutting through the iron-barred windows and the sound of my own heartbeat loud in my ears. Kieran was still asleep. His breathing was even deep, the kind of rest that comes from a body finally remembering it's safe. His arm was still around my waist, his hands played across my ribs like an anchor. I could hear voices beyond the door. Low, urgent. The kind of whispered argument that happens when people are trying very hard not to be overheard. I shifted carefully, trying not to wake him. His arm tightened reflexively, then relaxed when he felt me settle rather than pull away. Even unconscious, some part of him was tracking my presence, making sure I stayed. The voices stopped, footsteps approached. The door opened a crack. Ronan's scarred face appeared in the gap, his expression somewhere between relief and exhaustion. "You need to come out," he said quietly. "Now, before he wakes." "What's happening?" "Council emergency session. They want you present." I extracted myself slowly from Kieran's arms. He made a sound low, distressed, but didn't wake. I pulled the blanket up over his shoulders, tucked it around him, like he'd done for me with that first blanket weeks ago. "I'll be back," I whispered to his sleeping form. "I promise." The council chambers were exactly what I'd expected, all dark wood and stone, designed to make anyone standing before the curved bench of seated council members feel small. 11 wolves sat in judgment. Lord Corwin at the center, elevated slightly above the others. Vivian Cross stood to one side, technically an observer, but positioned close enough to Corwin to make the alliance clear. I stood in the center of the room in my grey maid's uniform, still wrinkled from sleeping in it. "Briar Thorne," Corwin began, "you've been assigned to West Wing maintenance for 26 days. In that time, you've had unprecedented access to the Alphaking, unauthorized personal contact, biological bonding that bypasses standard pack hierarchy." He paused. "The council must determine the nature of this connection and its implications for pack stability." "I cleaned his rooms and talked to him," I said. "That's the nature of the connection." "You slept in his bed," one of the other council members said. "That's considerably more than talking." "He asked me to stay. I stayed. That's not a crime." "It's not a crime," Corwin agreed smoothly. "It's an irregularity that requires examination." "Dr. Hargrave already explained it," I said. "Biological compatibility. My wolf doesn't trigger his dominance response." "Doctor." "Hargrave provided a hypothesis," Corwin said, "not proof. And even if true, it presents complications. An alpha who depends on a single individual for stability is an alpha who can be controlled through that individual. I'm not controlling him. Not intentionally, perhaps." Corwin leaned forward slightly. "But the effect is the same. If you left, he would relapse. That gives you considerable power. Power the council cannot ignore." Vivian spoke. "The Silver Pine Compact shares these concerns," she said. "An unstable Stonecrest threatens regional security. If you truly care about the Alpha King's well-being, you'll cooperate with oversight measures designed to protect both of you." I looked at Ronan. He stood against the wall, arms crossed, jaw tight. He couldn't speak against the council in open session, but his expression said everything. This was a trap. "I need time to think," I said. "You have until sunset," Corwin said, "after which the council will vote on protocols with or without your cooperation." Ronan caught up with me in the corridor outside. "They're going to separate you," he said without preamble. "The vote is already decided, 9-2. They'll pass it as protective custody, confine you to supervised quarters, limit contact with Kieran to scheduled sessions with guards present." "Why, what does Corwin gain?" "Control. Corwin has been effectively running the Dominion for 6 years since Marcus died. Kieran inherited the throne, but he was young, inexperienced, and then the curse hit. Corwin stepped in as interim administrator, and if Kieran recovers fully, he loses that power." "Exactly. So Corwin needs Kieran functional enough to legitimize the Dominion, but dependent enough to be managed. You're the perfect mechanism." We walked in silence for a moment. "There's something else," Ronan said quietly. "Marcus Wolf didn't die in a hunting accident. We've suspected for years, but we could never prove it." "Kieran knows," I said. "He told me. Someone here was responsible." Ronan stopped walking. "If he talked to you about that, Then you're not just stabilizing his wolf, you're reaching the man. He looked at me differently then, not like a maid, like an ally. Go to him, he said. Tell him what the council is planning. He deserves to know. I went back to the west wing. Kiran was awake, dressed, standing at the window. He turned when I entered. You left. Not an accusation, an observation. Council session, I said. They wanted to discuss us. His eyes narrowed. Still gold, but the human awareness was fully present now. And I told him everything. The protocols, the supervised contact, the protective custody that was really imprisonment. Corwin's plan to control him through controlling me. Kiran listened without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. They're right, he said finally. What? I am dependent on you. His voice was steady, clinical. When you're here, the wolf is quiet. My mind is clear. When you left this morning, I woke up and the first thing I felt was panic. He looked at me directly. That is dependency and it is exploitable. So what do? We give you the choice they're trying to take away. He crossed the room. Go home, back to Cedar Hollow. Your contract is fulfilled. Leave before they trap you here. And you. I'll manage. You'll relapse, I said. You know you will. Probably. His jaw tightened. But you'll be free. That matters more. I stared at him, at this man who'd been trapped in his own body for 14 months, who was finally clawing his way back to human consciousness, who was offering to let me go because he valued my freedom more than his own stability. No, I said. Briar, I'm staying because I choose to, I said. That's the whole point, choice. His hands came up framing my face, gentle, careful. They'll use you against me, he said quietly. Then we make sure they can't. I put my hands over his. We get proof of your father's death, of Corwin's conspiracy. We expose him before he can move against us. How? I thought of the vial Isla had given me. I know someone who might help, I said. I found Isla in the kitchen, pulled her aside into the cold storage room. I need to know everything, I said, about the nightshade. Where you found it, how much there was. Isla's eyes went wide. Why? The council is planning something, and I think Corwin is involved in more than just politics. If he had access to Nightshade 6 years ago, if he used it on Kiran's father, there might be evidence. I found 3 vials in a locked cabinet in the council records room, Isla said. I was delivering documents and the cabinet was open. I recognized the bottles, same type Mom used. I took one. Left 2. Can you get me into that room? Isla hesitated, then nodded. Kitchen staff has master keys. I can get you in. That night, Isla and I broke into the council records room. Isla used the kitchen master key. We waited until the evening session ended. Then we slipped in through the service entrance. The locked cabinet was against the far wall. It wasn't locked anymore. Someone had been here recently. The cabinet door hung slightly ajar. Inside where Isla said there should have been 3 vials, there were none. Someone had removed them. Corwin probably once he realized we were investigating, but whoever took them had been careless. They'd left the paperwork, purchase orders, shipping manifests, payment records, all dated 6 years ago, all signed by Lord Aldrich Corwin. Take it, I whispered. All of it. She gathered the documents while I searched the rest of the cabinet. At the very back behind old tax ledgers, I found something else. A journal, leather-bound, unmarked. I opened it. The first page was dated 14 months ago. The handwriting was Corwin's. The Alphaking's instability continues to worsen. The wolf dominance that began after Marcus's death has now consumed him entirely. The council agrees alternative leadership structures must be considered. KW is no longer viable long-term. I flipped through the pages. More entries. Clinical observations about Kieran's deterioration. Notes about Luna candidate failures. And then 3 months ago, Ellery Nash's death confirms what we suspected. KW cannot bond, cannot be saved through traditional means. The council must prepare for transition. I have contacted Silver Pine regarding interim governance arrangements. And the final entry dated 1 week ago. Maid Thorne presents unexpected complication. Her effect on KW is undeniable but exploitable. If she can be controlled, KW becomes manageable. If she cannot removal, solves both problems. Have consulted VC regarding methods. VC Vivian Cross. They'd been planning this together. We need to go, Isla hissed. Now! Footsteps in the corridor. We grabbed everything and ran. We made it back to the kitchen and hid the documents in a flour sack before anyone saw us. What do we do with this? Isla asked. We show it to Kieran, I said, and Ronan, and then we decide. But we didn't get the chance. The next morning, the council voted. Protective custody protocols approved. 9 votes to 2. Effective immediately. I was confined to a small room in the administrative wing. Not a cell. They called it secure quarters. But the door was locked from the outside. Guards were posted. No contact with Kieran. The first day was manageable. I had the documents. I spent hours reading through them, memorizing details, building the case. The second day was harder. I could feel the isolation creeping in. The third day, Dr. Hargrave came for her check. She looked exhausted. How is he? I asked immediately. Her expression told me everything. Deteriorating, she said quietly. The wolf is resurging. He hasn't slept in 50 hours. Refuses food. Destroyed the chamber furniture again. Let me see him. I can't. Council orders. Then tell Ronan I have evidence. About Corwin. About Marcus Wolf's death. The door opened. A guard stepped in. Time's up. She left. The door locked again. That evening when the guard brought my meal, I was ready. I need to speak to Beta Cade, I said, about a threat to the Alphaking's life. The guard hesitated. Council says no visitors. If something happens to him because you didn't pass this message, the council will hold you responsible. The guard's expression shifted. I'll relay the message. An hour later, Ronan came. You have 2 minutes. What's the intelligence? I told him about the documents, the purchase orders, the journal, Corwin's conspiracy with Vivian. Ronan's expression went from exhausted to coldly furious. Where are the documents now? Hidden in the kitchen. Isla knows where. Isla, my sister, kitchen staff, she found the nightshade vials. Ronan was already moving. What are you going to do? I'm going to get you out of here, he said. And then we're going to end this, tonight. 3 hours later, the door unlocked. Ronan stood there with 4 guards. Come with me. We moved through the citadel quickly. The west wing was heavily guarded, but they were Ronan's wolves. The antechamber was destroyed, worse than before. The air smelled like violence and desperation. The inner door was closed. Completely closed. He's in full wolf form, Ronan said quietly. Has been for 36 hours. I don't know if he'll recognize you. Let me try. Ronan opened the door. The chamber was dark except for moonlight, and in the center a massive black wolf, easily 200 pounds, gold eyes burning, hackles raised, a low growl building. The wolf saw me and went silent, frozen. I stepped into the room slowly, hands visible, voice calm. Kieran, I said, it's me, I'm here. The wolf's lips pulled back, showing teeth, a warning. I know you're in there, I said. I know you're scared. You thought I left, but I didn't. They locked me away. I've been trying to get back to you. The growl deepened, uncertain. I have proof, I said. About your father, about Corwin. I know what he did, and we're going to make it right. But I need you to come back to me. The wolf whined, a heartbreaking sound. I crossed the last few feet and sat down on the floor. Made myself small, vulnerable. I'm not going anywhere, I said quietly. When you're ready, I'll be right here. Silence. The wolf watching me. Then slowly it approached, sniffed my hair, my hands, testing. Recognition hit like lightning. The wolf collapsed beside me, massive head in my lap, and the shift began. Bones cracking, fur receding, human form emerging. Kieran naked, shaking eyes, still that mix of gold and hazel, curled on the floor with his head in my lap. You came back, he whispered. I'll always come back, I said. My hands were in his hair, holding him together. Always. Behind us, Ronan spoke quietly. We have the evidence, Corwin's journal, purchase orders for Nightshade dated to your father's death, correspondence with Vivian about managing you through Briar. Kieran's arms tightened around me. What do we do? We call a formal hearing, Ronan said. Tomorrow, full pack assembly. We present the evidence publicly. The council won't allow it. Not if you invoke Alpha's right, Ronan said. As Pack Alpha, you have authority to call assembly for matters of pack security. The council can't block it. Kieran pulled back enough to look at me. His eyes were clearing. Are you with me? He asked. Always, I said. He stood, pulled on clothes Ronan had brought, straightened his shoulders. And for the first time in 14 months, the Alpha King of Stonecrest Dominion walked out of the West Wing under his own power. The pack assembly was called for dawn. Every wolf in the citadel was summoned to the Great Hall. It was pack law. When the Alpha called assembly for security, Matter's attendance was mandatory. Corwin arrived looking calm. Vivian stood beside him, composed as ever. They didn't know what was coming. Kieran stood at the head of the hall. I stood beside him. Not behind, beside. Ronan was on his other side. Isla stood in the crowd, pale but determined. Dr. Hargrave was there as medical expert. 200 wolves, packed into the great hall, waiting. Kieran's voice when he spoke was clear, strong. This assembly is called to address a matter of pack security and justice, he said. 6 years ago, my father, Alpha Marcus Wolf, died in what was recorded as a hunting accident. I'm here to present evidence that it was murder. The hall erupted in whispers. Beta Cade, Kieran said. Present the evidence. Ronan stepped forward with the documents. He held them up for the assembly to see. Purchase orders for Nightshade extract, Ronan said. Dated 6 years ago. Signed by Lord Aldrich Corwin. Quantity sufficient to kill a wolf through slow poisoning. He displayed each page. A journal, Ronan continued, also belonging to Lord Corwin, documenting his observations about Alpha Marcus's declining health and his plans for interim administration should the Alpha become incapacitated. Murmurs grew louder, angrier. And correspondence, Ronan said, between Lord Corwin and Lady Vivian Cross, discussing how to manage the current Alpha King through control of the stabilizing female. He looked directly at me. That would be Briar Thorne, the maid Lord Corwin placed in protective custody 3 days ago. The crowd's energy shifted, calculation turning to fury. Corwin stood. These documents are fabrications, he said calmly. The Alpha King has been non-functional for over a year. His judgment is compromised. I'm not compromised, Kieran said. His voice cut through the hall. I'm awake. For the first time in 14 months, I'm fully conscious. And I remember things, like how my father died screaming, like how you were the one who brought him his meals in those final weeks, like how you were the first to suggest I was too young to rule alone. He stepped down from the platform, walking toward Corwin. You killed my father, Kieran said. You've been running this dominion like your personal territory ever since. And when I started to recover, when Briar helped me come back, you tried to control her to control me. Prove it, Corwin said. Isla Thorne, Kieran called. My sister stepped forward. She was shaking, but her voice was steady. I found 3 vials of Nightshade extract in the council records room 2 weeks ago, she said. Same substance my mother used to poison my father 2 years ago. I recognized the bottles. She pulled out the vial, held it up. This is evidence, she said, of a pattern. Dr. Hargrave stepped forward. I can confirm, she said. The symptoms Alpha Marcus displayed before his death are consistent with Nightshade poisoning. And I can confirm that this pattern of using individuals as expendable tools is not new to this council. 3 women, Elara Finn, Mira Holt, Ellery Nash, were sent to the Alpha King knowing the dominance differential would destroy them, not to help him, to prove he was beyond help, so the council could justify removing him. She looked directly at Corwin. You were willing to sacrifice them to maintain your control, just as you were willing to sacrifice Briar. The crowd was turning. Wolves, calling for justice. Corwin looked at Kieran, and for the first time I saw fear in his eyes. You have no proof I poisoned Marcus. I can invoke Alpha's justice, Kieran said quietly. The hall went silent. I, Kieran Wolf Alpha of Stonecrest Dominion, invoke Alpha's justice, Kieran said formally. Lord Aldrich Corwin, you are charged with the murder of Alpha Marcus Wolf, with conspiracy to control pack leadership, with attempted murder of Briar Thorne. He looked at the assembly. Judgment guilty. Sentence X. Permanent. You are stripped of rank territory and pack protection. You will leave Stonecrest lands by sunset. 2 guards moved forward to Biddy Corwin. He didn't fight, he just looked at Kieran with hatred. You'll fail, he said. Without me, you'll fail. We'll manage, Kieran said. Corwin was dragged out. Vivian tried to slip away, but Ronan's guards caught her. Lady Cross, Kieran said. You're not charged with murder, but you are no longer welcome in Stonecrest. Return to Silver Pine. Word would reach us 3 weeks later. Silver Pine Compact had disavowed her, publicly stripped her of diplomatic credentials, and barred her from all border territories. She'd gambled on controlling Stonecrest and lost everything. That was its own justice. The assembly dispersed slowly, wolves talking, processing what they'd witnessed. Kieran looked at me. It's done, he said. It's done, I agreed. He took my hand, publicly, in front of everyone still watching. I'm making you my official advisor, he said. Cartography, weather forecasting, strategic planning, whatever titles we need. But really I'm asking you to stay, not as a maid, not as a tool, as my partner, my equal. Yes, I said. He kissed me then, in front of the entire pack. The first real kiss, deliberate, public, a declaration. When we pulled apart, the wolves were howling. Approval, acceptance. The Alphaking had his mate, and she'd chosen him freely. 6 months later, the Citadel looked different. The corruption investigations had resulted in 5 more council members being removed. Ronan had restructured the entire administrative system. Transparency boards were posted in every corridor. The debt transfer system had been abolished, and I was teaching. 3 mornings a week, I taught meteorology and cartography to young wolves. 15 students, mixed ranks. Anyone could attend. The barometric pressure is dropping, I told them. What does that tell us? Storm coming, one student said. How long? 48 hours. Good. Now look at the wind direction. What does that change? They debated. I watched them work through the problem. I was 5 months pregnant. The baby, a girl, Dr. Hargrave said was active, kicking during lectures, making her opinions known early. Kieran said she got that from me. I told him she got her stubbornness from both of us, and we were in serious trouble. The door opened. Kieran entered with a lunch basket. The students stood. Respect, not fear. Don't let me interrupt, he said. We're finishing, I told them. Read chapters 4 through 6. Friday we'll discuss atmospheric pressure systems. They filed out. Kieran set the basket on my desk. How's she doing? Oh, put his hand on my belly. Opinionated. She kicked me 3 times during the wind patterns lecture. She's perfect then. We ate lunch together. Through the window I could see the courtyard. Changes were visible everywhere. New training protocols. The Civilian Oversight Board Isla served on. The Eastern Cemetery, where we'd placed a memorial for Marcus Wolf murdered. Avenged. Remembered. After lunch, I walked to the window. The courtyard below was busy. Tessa waved from the laundry delivery cart, her red hair bright in the sunlight. She'd been promoted to logistics coordinator, managing supply chains. The Kitchen Gossip Network had become the Oversight Board's most reliable intelligence source. Ronan wants to discuss the southern border treaties, Kieran said. Your assessment of the mountain passes was right. I'll be there. I set down my bread. But first I need to visit Isla. Freya and Finn are coming next week. My younger siblings had been moved to the Citadel 3 months ago. Morrigan was in prison awaiting trial. Isla had petitioned for custody. The council approved it. Family could be rebuilt, slowly, with truth instead of lies. Kieran walked me to the door, kissed me goodbye. That evening, I stood on the citadel walls watching the sunset. The sky was turning gold and crimson. The mountains were sharp against the light. I'd mapped most of that terrain now. Kieran found me there, wrapped his arms around me from behind, hands settling over our daughter. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "That I'm glad I fell asleep on your chest," I said. He laughed, real laughter. "That's a strange thing to be grateful for. Is it? If I hadn't been exhausted that night, if I hadn't stumbled into the wrong room, if I'd been too afraid to stay, we'd both still be alone," he finished. "You would have found your way back eventually." "No." His voice was certain. "I was disappearing. The wolf was winning. You gave me a reason to fight back. You saw a man where everyone else saw a monster." "You were never a monster," I said. "You were just trapped." We both were, in different ways. We stood there as the sun set his arms around me, our daughter moving between us. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked quietly. "Being sold to pay a debt, ending up here." I thought about it, about my father's death, about Morrigan's betrayal, about walking into the West Wing expecting to die, and finding a wolf who needed someone to stay. "No," I said. "I don't regret it, because it led me here, to you, to this." I turned in his arms to face him. "I was a maid worth less than a tax debt," I said. "And you were an alpha everyone had given up on. We weren't supposed to save each other, but we did." "We did," he agreed. He kissed me as the sun dropped below the mountains. And somewhere in the citadel below, wolves were going about their evening routines, cooking dinner, training, studying, living lives that were a little more free than they'd been 6 months ago. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do isn't roar the loudest or fight the hardest. Sometimes it's choosing to see someone when everyone else looks away, and then standing beside them, not behind, not in front, beside. That's what changes the world.